Good evening, everyone. It is now 5:30, and I will call this work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. And if the clerk would note that Councilmember Gustafson is not able to be with us this evening. He is sick, and hope that he gets well soon. And I believe as we go around, I just also want to mention that Senator Port is not feeling well and is not able to join us this evening. So I'm Elizabeth Couts, Mayor of the City of Burnsville, and we're going to go around and introduce ourselves around the table, and then I'll go to the outside of the table. I'll start with our City Manager.
Thanks, Mayor. Greg Lindberg, City Manager. Good to see you all tonight.
Kara Schultz, City Council.
Dan Keeley, City Council.
Jeff Thompson, Deputy City Manager and Community Development Director.
Mike Tracy, HR Director.
Liz Ryer, State Representative, portions of Burnsville and Egan.
Jim Carlson, State Senator, Senate District 52, portions of Burnsville.
Kayla Berg, State Representative. I represent the heart of Burnsville. And Representative Hansen will be here shortly. She's pulling mom duty.
Okay.
And Bethany Brewer, Strategic Initiatives.
Jenny Rohde, Deputy City Manager and CFO.
Tanya Schwartz, Police Chief.
ADJOURNMENT, Fire Chief.
Vince Workman, City Council.
Erica Henderson, Deputy City Clerk.
Okay, and we'll go to our guests who are here. We'll start with the Commissioner.
Liz Workman, Dakota County Commissioner.
Charlie Bissonette, LA Magnet Eco Advocate.
Glenn Paymer, LA Magnet. Dawn Branch, LA Magnet Eco Advocate.
Chris Bierman, LA Magnet Eco
Okay.
Advocate.
Donna Jensen, Burnsville resident.
Betsy Sturm, LA Magnet Eco Advocate.
Andrea Grazzini, LA Magnet Eco Advocates.
John Vector, LA Magnet Eco Yes. That's okay.
Candace Victor, I'm with LA Magnet as well. Alan Chesky, Lockridge, Grimmel, Lowen.
Alex Hassel with Lockridge, Grimmel, Lowen.
Spencer Cox, consultant with Stantec.
Luann Shearer, down there.
Jason Shearer, Burnsville resident. Ed Stern, LA Magnet Eco Advocates.
Susan Bissonette, LA Magnet Advocate.
Okay.
Jay Creshow, LA Magnet Eco Advocate.
Diana Mauer, LA Magnet Eco Advocate.
Okay.
Travis Bissidu, Deputy Community Development Director.
Beth Weber, Economic Development Coordinator.
Welcome, everyone. Now, I do know, this is a work session, but I do know that, Mr. Shearer, you want to make some remarks, and so you all want to make sure that your thoughts on every one of our meetings are recorded. Please, we'll start with you before we get to our agenda.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is David Shearer, as I just introduced. I live at 14009 Frontier Lane in Burnsville. And I'm here this evening to just make a few statements in opposition to the pickleball courts that are proposed for Allen Magnet Park. I'll start by saying that I've been a Burnsville resident for 47 years, and believe it or not, I even remember the days when Burnsville wasn't, the mayor wasn't the mayor of Burnsville. So I've been here a long time. For all these years, I've always considered Burnsville to be a well-managed city. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that Burnsville is probably ranked as one of the best managed cities in the state of Minnesota. When it comes to pickleball in Allen Magnet Park, I've attended enough recent council meetings and work sessions that I am confident that council understands the issues and council understands the overwhelming opposition to pickleball in Allen Magnet Park. So tonight, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but I want to just put in a few comments to be sure that they become part of the public record and we get continuity in what we're trying to say here tonight. Facts that I believe should be of concern not just to the people living around the park, but should be of concern to every single Burnsville resident. Historically, the Burnsville portion of our property taxes has increased at a rate somewhere around the rate of inflation, usually around 3 or 4% or less annually. But this year, in 2025, the Burnsville portion of our property taxes will increase over 7%. This follows an increase of 7.63% last year and proposed increases of over 7% for the foreseeable future. Why are these tax increases necessary? Burnsville property taxes are growing at this unprecedented rate because the city and their consultants has determined that essential city services are underfunded. So I ask, if fire, police, public works, and other essential city services are underfunded, why is the city proposing to spend over $1.3 million on pickleball courts, a parking lot, a project that will only serve a tiny portion of the city residents? Why is this money not being used to fund our much-needed and underfunded essential services, service that will be used by every member of our community? I'm not against pickleball. We spend money on all kinds of things that improve the quality of life in the city of Burnsville. It's one of the reasons I live here. But I ask, is this the right time to be spending over $1 million on pickleball courts? I believe that spending for pickleball courts, when essential services are underfunded, services that are essential to every single resident in the city, at a time of out-of-control tax increases at every level of government, just not the city, it's an unwise thing to be doing at this time. And it certainly sends a wrong message to all the residents of the city of Burnsville. If anyone wants to fact-check my numbers, I got them right off the city website. Thanks again for allowing me to speak.
And thank you for continuing to come and let your voices be heard. And I want you to know that your voices are being heard, so thank you very much. And I know you're going to be here at our council meeting next week, so, yeah. So, you know, I know that you want to make sure that your voices are heard and you're bringing new information to be brought before us. Thank you. Yeah.
And I would
Yeah.
love to have you guys at our budget meetings. Nothing would warm my heart more
Yeah.
than to not have an utterly empty council meeting every time we have budget and tax discussions. So,
Well said.
Keep showing up.
Yeah.
come on.
So we look forward to seeing you next week. And Mrs. Paymar, I think you can speak next week. So thank you. If you don't want to stick around for the rest of our agenda, you may leave and enjoy the warmth of your home. So, but thank you for coming. Okay,
Madam Mayor,
yes.
Representative Hanson joined us.
Oh,
Maybe we'll have-
Representative Hanson, welcome. Why don't you just introduce yourself to everyone?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. I apologize for being late. My son had a basketball game, so getting through all the stoplights just across the street took a little bit longer, so I appreciate the patience in letting me arrive late. I'm Jessie Hansen. I represent 55A. It's the entire northwest part of Burnsville and the entire city of Savage.
Well, thank you for coming. You know, you have to have mom duties also, you know? Yeah, very good. So, thank you. So members of the public are welcome to attend in person. As you just saw, a lot of our residents have been here in person and spoke to issues that are important to them. So, and people may choose to watch this meeting on burnsvillemn.gov/meetings or on Comcast Channel 16 or 859. The public can also participate on Zoom by joining us at zoom.us/join, and more information is available on our meeting webpage and in the council agenda packet. So tonight is a work session, and we go directly to the items that's on our agenda. The first item on the agenda is our legislative briefing, and Fire Chief Jungmann is going to be presenting the legislative agenda. Fire Chief Jungmann, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. We'll take a couple minutes and just kind of run through what our legislative agenda and priorities are for this session, since session started today. So thank you all for making the time. I know it's a busy day on the first day, so here we are. So if you pull out the handout that we have of our legislative agenda, some of our top priorities EMS, you've probably heard plenty from me on this, continues to be a priority, modernizing our EMS legislation. As you likely know, the Office of EMS was created January 1st, sunsetting the EMS Regulatory Board, and Dylan Ferguson was appointed the Executive Director, and we look forward to working with him. We don't have any specific legislative ask on this, other than we continue to want transparency, accountability, and data collection as they move into the Office of EMS. I'll give you one example. If it's not a public service providing the service, they don't have to disclose what they charge patients, and we would like that to be published across the board, or response times and things like that. So we'll continue to work with the agency and then with you as legislators to try to continue to make progress. We know that's a long-term position to continue to evolve. The second one you will see there is local control. And as you know, each municipality is unique, and we all have different needs. And so we would ask you to give us the autonomy on things like land use, alternative revenue sources like franchise fees that are important to us, and maintain existing revenue tools. So we think each community does a good job. They have locally elected officials that can tailor the framework for the city that works best for the city. So we'll continue to advocate for that. And then we're also going to ask you for sales tax exemption on this project for the expansion and renovation of Police City Hall. The police project already has a standing exemption for public safety facilities, but the City Hall side does not. So we would like to see that extended to the City Hall side. It's not uncommon for cities to request and grant tax exemption for municipal facilities. State funding requests. We got a couple of things we're asking for. And you have a couple different handouts on those besides the legislative agenda. One is the water treatment plants. I appreciate all your support last year. We made the bonding tours, and that was wonderful. Everybody was able to see our fine water treatment plant, and as you likely know, we are very different in how we treat water. We have both surface and groundwater, so we basically have two different parallel water treatment plants there. And particularly our groundwater plant is in need of some dire overhaul, and it's a regional asset because it doesn't just serve Burnsville, it serves Savage. It's helped recharge the Fen by using surface water, and as we know, things like PFAS are coming into fruition, and as we find ways to filter for that or treat for that, it's important that we're ready for that treatment to happen. So it's a $17 million request, half of that funded by the city and half of it funded by bonding. And we have the ability to phase it. We know that $17 million for a project or 8.55 from the state is a big ask for a single project. And so if we get to the point where we need to scale that back, we can definitely talk about what phasing of that might look like to best accomplish it. So the second one is another one that should be pretty common to you, is the Nicollet and 13 mobility improvement project of doing grade separation between Nicollet Avenue and Highway 13. We know that that intersection gets a lot of vehicle traffic as well as a lot of pedestrian traffic, and Highway 13 is a major thoroughfare, and getting that separated is important. We actually had a meeting with the MnDOT commissioner today to keep this on their radar because we have maxed out what we can get from GO bonds for design, and we really need trunk highway funds from the state to help fill the $20 million gap. And we've tried the RAISE grant federally, and we'll go back after that again, but we're about $20 million out of the $44 million project short, which is in that handout. And again, this is very important. That intersection is 5 times the average accident rate compared to the state average. We've had car versus pedestrian accidents there that are horrific, and it's very important. We have multi-housing on both sides of it. We have transportation hubs on both sides of it. We have business on both sides of it. So, and 25% of the people that live in that area don't own a personal vehicle. So they rely on that public transportation. So there is a lot of back and forth across 13. And we think that this is a huge safety improvement as well as a mobility improvement. It'll actually help the traffic on 13, as we saw when we put in the 5 and 13 grade separation years ago. If you go to the back of the sheet, we have a number of supporting positions. The freeway landfill and dump remediation, again, another long-term project that, we want to get the piece of the landfill that's not lined to protect our groundwater. Again, a long-term project. We continue to work with the MPCA and keep that on their radar and as a priority. And as you know, dig and haul has been our preferred option there. And we'll continue to work with the agency on that and keep that as a priority. As you know, we're also home to not only landfills, so the host community economic development grant, as well as the aggregate mining fee, because we do have a quarry here. A little known fact to people that aren't from here. So we have an active quarry there. We added something on school resource officers. It's been going fine now, but there was a chance that we might have to clean some of that up based on how the agency implemented that, and we haven't run into that yet, but we wanted to keep that on the radar in case there was some cleanup. So not saying there won't be, but as of right now, there's no push for that, and it seems to have been going okay right now. Statutory Plan B administrative purchasing. So this is statutory Plan A cities can administratively purchase at a much higher level. I believe it's $175,000. And we're a statutory Plan B city, and there's only a handful of us across the state, but we are limited to $20,000. And things cost a lot more, and it's been $20,000 for many, many years. And so we would just like the same administrative purchasing. Doesn't mean we don't have to follow the same purchasing policies, getting quotes and things like that, but just the ability to administratively purchase. And it would be up to the council to, even if it was allowed statutorily, the council would still have to approve what threshold they want to allow administratively. So just because if it allows up to $175,000, cities don't have to make that administrative, but it gives them the flexibility to say, well, maybe 20,000 isn't the right number. Maybe it's 50 or 40 or whatever they want under that 175. It just, right now, we end up with very long consent agendas because a significant amount of things cost more than 20,000 to operate a city. So, and there are many very routine purchases. And then the last one is the continuation of franchise fees. We want to keep that on there. As you know, our council has dedicated franchise fees to municipal facilities, and we're undergoing a large renovation in addition to Police City Hall, funding that through franchise fees, and that's an important revenue source that we want to maintain. So I know I hit those all quick, but that is the highlight of our legislative agenda. So I'll stand for any questions.
Fire Chief Jungmann stands for questions. Members of the legislature, any questions with what has been presented? Yes, Representative Berg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question. Why is Burnsville a statutory Plan B city?
Representative Berg, I actually don't know the answer to that, other than well before my time, we chose to do that. What I understand is every city, when they become a new city, is automatically a statutory Plan A unless they choose to be statutory Plan B and declare that and pass an ordinance for that, or they decide to be home rule charter. And so the mayor may have some more background on that. I don't have the historical context other than I know that's the process. I don't know when or why.
When we were incorporated, the leaders of the city at that time chose to have Burnsville to be a statutory B city rather than A, and that's how we operate. So we hire the city manager, and he hires the rest of the staff. And so, but he reports directly to us, and therefore the rest of the staff with regard to the delivery of items that need to be done. And so we work together on all of those issues.
Okay.
Does
I would
that
just
help?
like to increase our our aid so that we can do the things that we need to do. So my question was more around like, how do we tap into more money for our city?
Yeah. It's a choice that the leaders at that time made. Yeah. Representative Breyer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question, you know that capital investment bonding is close to my heart, and so have to talk about water treatment for a minute. It was a great tour to come out and see the facility. It was very useful to our team, to the committee. Is the request changed? Is it basically the same moving forward? And will you need to do a fiscal adjustment to it just based on the elapse of time?
Yeah, Representative Ryer, thanks for the question. It is a very similar project. I think we updated some newer technology that's come along. I know our Public Works Director kind of reevaluated that and then repriced it. To your point, costs continue to go up, so it has gone up a little bit. I think we're at 15 point something last year. And so we know that costs go up, so we've projected that inflation for next year, so.
Well, I'm glad to know that, because otherwise I would have been coming and asking you these questions separately, and now we've taken care of that. Thank you
Sounds
so
good.
much.
Thanks.
Okay, good. Yes, Senator.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, this is kind of opens up a subject for me that is close to my heart. You hear the media making an issue of a future deficit that we're going to have in the state. That's a future deficit. That's for the next 2 years after this 2 years. This 2 years we have a small surplus. And what seems to be happening is that is being ignored. There will be a small surplus. But what we can do is we can make sure that bonding bill, which I call a construction bill, is approved as early as possible. And in fact, I've talked to financial people for the state, and if we have a problem in both the House and the Senate right now in getting things done quickly. But if we could get it passed and get it signed before the deadline of getting into the February forecast, that money that would be that's part of the bonding bill, which goes for jobs, it goes for sales tax, it goes for all sorts of things that go back into the general fund, that much of that deficit in the 2 years out would go away because it would all be spent this year. We constantly miss the construction season. We constantly fight over these small numbers of votes that we need from the party that's not in power. But if we could get those votes, because it requires 2/3 votes, we could get this bonding bill passed, and we could get these projects going as fast as possible. And I think both your residents would like to see that, and we would like to see it in the budget. And I can also tell you that you don't have any problem with your legislators here, because we will all vote for the bonding bill. But if you have any way to put pressure on those people that are reluctant to do that, even though they have projects in their own districts, please help us put pressure on them.
Okay. Chief Jungman, I think you and our lobbyist, Lencheski, can help work on all of these things and then bring it back and let us know what it is that we can do with regard to how we continue to move these projects forward so that we can get some of those funds.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, we'll work with our great team at Lockridge to accomplish our agenda and work through the state processes.
Okay. And it appears to me that we have some folks who will carry the bill for us. Yeah, I see all the heads nodding. So very good. Okay. Any other questions? So thank you so much for being with us and working together for the good of our shared constituencies. Because when we work together, we're successful. And so thank you for your diligence and the work that you do at the legislature on behalf of the people that elect us to office. And that's our job. They elect us to office, so we're all here together to work for their good. So thank you for that. Mr. Lindberg, is there anything that you would like to add to this discussion?
Just appreciate you all being here. Thank you very much for the time. We very much are looking forward to working with you this year, and to the council, thank you for your work and helping us to establish an agenda that gives us clear direction as we work with our partners at LGN, and the chief fills his role in leading our legislative efforts. Very much appreciate the partnership and work across the table.
Okay. Members of the council, any comments that you would like to make? Councilmember Keeley.
I just want to thank Representative Hansenberg and Ryer and our Senator Carlson for their support. I'm the current board chair of the Minnesota Valley Transit Authority, and you've been very supportive of suburban transit providers and the challenge we have with Met Council and how the funding is allocated. And so we have an exciting event coming up on March 5th that we're going to talk about all kinds of mobility, accessibility, and I hope that you'll all be able to get away from the legislative session on March 5th from 8 to 1 p.m. to be able to attend that. Invitations are going to arrive soon. Thank you.
So I look forward to working with all of you, and I'll be happy to be down at the Capitol again to testify on all of these things, because we have some things here like the water treatment plan and 13 and Nicollet. I think working together we can get great results for all of this. And to our staff and to our lobbyists and everybody, thank you. And to all of you for carrying the water for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. You can go back to the warmth of your home and out of the cold. Thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate it. Okay, the next item on the agenda is our Housing and Commercial Needs Assessment Study update. And our Deputy City Manager, Community Development Director, Jeff Thompson, is presenting. Mr. Thompson, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll just do a very brief introduction to get to the presentation, but as you recall, it was back in November of 2023 where the council agreed to the contracts with Stantec to partner with us to complete two deliverables on our community vibrancy strategic priority. The first is what you're going to hear about tonight, which is our housing and commercial needs assessment, originally involved from an inventory to a needs assessment to help define what was the second deliverable, which is our update to our economic development strategic framework. So we've provided the report is now done. The work behind the housing and commercial needs assessment has been completed. This is really the wrapping up of that project, and we've provided the full report in your packet and to the full council, and we'll make it available on our website to the community. So this is just an opportunity for Spencer Cox with our consultant team at Stantec is here to we're not going to go through everything. It's a dense report with a lot of data around our economy and our people and our commercial markets, but we wanted to highlight a lot of the important data for you tonight that you will see how that has helped shape and form our economic development strategic framework, which you are currently scheduled to see at your February work session. So with that, Mayor, I will turn it over to Spencer to walk through the presentation.
Welcome, Spencer.
Thank you so much.
Floor is yours.
Can everyone hear me? Is the mic working?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to be here with me and to let me present to you. It's a real privilege to be able to present the work that we've been putting together and compiling. The major point of this presentation, right, and one of the reasons that we were contracted to do both of these studies is that we wanted to connect an inventory of the housing, office, industrial, and retail market, overall trends in the economy and demographics, to understanding then kind of economic strategies moving forward. So the point of this presentation today is to mostly focus on the kind of major economic drivers within Burnsville and how that relates to the overall health of the commercial real estate markets, and then how that relates to kind of future strategies to address current needs within the community. So starting from a really big picture, if we look at kind of regional growth within Dakota County, there's been really strong economic growth in GDP. Region-wide, the share of GDP has slightly shifted towards the metro area, but in general, it is a growth-related area rather than an area that's in decline. So we have strong economic growth, and where that growth is largely happening, and especially in the Dakota County area, is in the manufacturing sector. So the manufacturing sector still remains a major source of GDP. While it may not be as large of a source of job creation because of the efficiencies that happen within machine-intensive manufacturing processes, it still produces a large amount of tradable goods that are very important for driving growth in other sectors, right? So tradable goods are the important aspects that drive demand and affected demand for services like retail, spending on medical services, a range of other service-related occupations that depend essentially on those tradable goods. So other really important aspects are that wholesale trade remain a major part of the regional economy, and so does finance and insurance and government services. So in general, though, manufacturing remains kind of the major aspect of Dakota County's tradable goods sector. And if we look kind of regionally, it's really hard to see, I think, on this smaller presentation up here. But one of the things that we looked at is called a shift share analysis. And this might not be something that people have touched on since maybe if they ever went to planning school, but what shift share analyses do is they look at what you would expect job growth to be in a particular industry based on national growth trends and what they actually are relative to the industries within the particular location. And within the Twin Cities, there's actually been kind of decline in office-related jobs, in particular in management of companies and enterprises. So quite surprisingly, demand for office has been hit not just by changes in how people work and in how people use work from home, but also a decline region-wide in office-related occupations. So if you look at the bottom right there, one of our largest industries is management of companies and enterprises in the Twin Cities region. And we've had much lower, actually negative growth relative to what we would be expected based on the size of that industry in the region. On the other hand, the top right quadrant of high-wage jobs that are growing really well, medical device manufacturing and medical devices in general is a major part of growth within our regional economy. And if you go on the kind of left quadrant, those are lower wage jobs that are growing at faster rates, and those are a lot of our industries that relate to health services, in particular individual and family services and continuing care. And then kind of on the bottom left are lower wage jobs that are growing lower than you would expect. And that's a lot of service sector jobs and retail jobs that, despite having a pretty high concentration here, have had a hard time recruiting labor in a tight labor market. If we did the same thing when looking at Burnsville relative to the broader Twin Cities, and when we started to actually deconstruct this market and looked at expected growth, a lot of the medical office or in office-related positions have actually grown in Burnsville, where they've decreased region-wide. And we see that then in the office-related data, where there's actually strong performance in a lot of the office sector relative to what's happening in the metro-wide area, but also a really strong growth in manufacturing and in wholesale trade. And these remain kind of major strengths of the economy. And again, in this top right quadrant, they are higher than the median wage jobs and remain areas of strong growth. If we look at kind of total composition of jobs, though, while the growth in the manufacturing sector is really important, there's a lot of jobs that still remain, about 40% in kind of low-wage service sector jobs. So those are still retail, accommodation and food services, restaurants. So while they may not be growing at a similar rate, they still are a large proportion of total jobs within the regional economy. And if we look on kind of the graph, the line graph, those are kind of changes in locational quotients. So the proportion of jobs relative to the regional economy, and there's strong growth in kind of the lower wage retail service sector jobs, as well as kind of the manufacturing sector, but kind of a decline in some of the higher wage service sector jobs in the tradable services, and pretty consistent growth and consistent proportions within kind of education, medical services, and government. So I wanted to turn to kind of some bigger pictures. I'm going to go back to this one, but where we kind of see, if we look in the last 5-year growth patterns, again, there's very strong growth in kind of manufacturing and wholesale. There's been kind of a decline in office-related jobs, but that's happening region-wide, and it's less so within Burnsville. But there's also been a really strong growth in kind of medical services as these kind of really good middle-income industries with occupations that tend to support kind of larger family-wide growth. So one of the interesting aspects that we were looking at was the relationship between kind of the manufacturing and wholesale economy, the major sectors that use industrial space, and the industrial space that exists within Burnsville. One of the really interesting aspects of industrial space in the Twin Cities is that for the most recent years, the only kind of space that can get developed are these really large 1 million plus square foot industrial facilities that are largely based for distribution and warehousing. And that's because the large amount of developers that work in industrial space pull money from national REITs, so real estate investment trusts and national capital, and what they can actually build and tend to do so at scale are these very large distribution centers and very large manufacturing spaces that are largely based in kind of the ex-urban areas of the city. What hasn't been built and what is very hard to build is smaller and mid-sized industrial space that's close to the city's core, that can serve a broad range of businesses from wholesalers to smaller industrial manufacturers that that are really crucial to a regional economy, that produce a high amount of growth and job creation, but nonetheless is really hard to create new space. So if you look at this graph here, the occupancy rates is tracing kind of the number of all industrial spaces relative to small ones, which has a much lower vacancy rate. So if you look at the vacancy rate of smaller industrial space, that's more on par with Burnsville's industrial space, so less than 50,000 square feet. It's less than 2%, which is a really tight market, which signifies, again, really high demand for that relative to the larger industrial spaces that are being developed that have a much higher vacancy rate and not as much strong demand. So that consequence of kind of looking at that regional market is that there's really good demand and really low vacancy rates for Burnsville's kind of unique industrial space. And that's led to, you know, some pretty stable rents, but in general, lower vacancy rates and pretty high occupancy. So in general, right, if we're looking at kind of industrial space that's within the Burnsville area, it's this largely, if you look at like the Lark and Cliff Road area, it was largely built in the 1980s, tend to be below 50,000 square feet. So the average size is about 37,000 square feet, but it has a very low vacancy rate, really high demand. The newer kind of industrial space within South Cross has some buildings that are more on spec with contemporary manufacturing spaces and demand. But also, again, it's kind of the smaller industrial space that has a really low vacancy rate, really high demand, right? So these spaces are performing really well. And that has an interesting juxtaposing effect, contradictory effect. So they're performing well enough that's really hard to redevelop, right? If you have a space that's performing well, you're not going to tear it down to build something else because that space is already performing well and meeting expectations, especially on loans that probably have already been paid off in those spaces, right? So they're doing too well to redevelop, but in general also aging in some spaces that need some rehabilitation and renovation. So in general, what this kind of means of thinking about that space is that there's strategies that you can do to rehabilitate that office space and kind of think about preserving that industrial space to meet the needs of smaller and mid-sized businesses that are really crucial to a regional economy. Some of the other things that we found in that, right, so not only is it unique and well-positioned, but there's also some issues and challenges that are happening. There's some encroachment of non-industrial users into industrial space. So there's a lot of churches, restaurants, breweries, what I call the suburban sports complex. So, you know, indoor training facilities, gyms, gymnastics facilities, right? There's a whole range of different uses, pickleball courts. They're looking to use those spaces because they offer cheap space, but nonetheless can crowd out some other industries and other kind of manufacturing and wholesaling spaces that produce higher quality jobs that could also be using that space that is in very limited supply within the metro area. Again, what we talked about with industrial districts that they're aging but hard to redevelop, there can be strategies that some cities like Shakopee and Bloomington have taken to renovate and develop kind of similar to kind of like a retail area where you do kind of shop front improvements and roadway improvements to improve those kind of areas. But in general, kind of preserving that industrial space that is in really high demand should be a priority moving forward. So if you switch to the office market, what I was saying earlier is that in general, some of the office users and the industries within Burnsville are performing well relative to the Twin Cities, even though they've kind of been declining in total use. So in general, the kind of office vacancy rates have been lower than kind of the Twin Cities averages in the office space. About 25% of that is in the medical space, especially in the Fairview area. But in general, if we think about office, we kind of have to take a step back and think of office trends nationally, right? So since COVID-19, there's been a push from a lot of people within that workforce to work from home and continue to work from home. And that has really impacted the office market by declining demand for office space. But the kind of areas that have been really hard hit have been kind of B, C grade office spaces, as well as kind of mid-tier Class A office spaces that have a large central users. And Burnsville doesn't have a ton of that space, and it's actually performing really well because it doesn't have the kind of campuses that typically have been facing higher vacancy rates as companies downsize. So there's the general trend in office that's impacting it from work from home, but there's also what we were talking about earlier with the Twin Cities office demand that's been declining as a whole because there's been a kind of low growth in those kind of office using sectors. So in general, the office space is really difficult, both nationally, locally, and within Burnsville in particular. And in general, when it comes to building new office space, so if we're thinking about redevelopment perhaps around the mall, that kind of work is not going to be really happening in the next 10 years. It's really difficult to finance those projects. Occupancy has not returned to pre-occupancy levels since COVID-19. In general, the market's going to be really cold to develop new office space because of the way in which the market's been impacted. It's very similar to like the retail market. When Amazon came in, for the last 15 years, no one's actually built retail space, despite retail space performing relatively well in the metro, because the finance side of it has been really risk averse to adding new space because of industry disruption. So think of office in a similar way. It's going to be very difficult, and there's going to be very low new development of office space, in particular speculative built office space. One area that is performing well, though, is medical office, and that's a really strong element of Burnsville's economy. It operates kind of as a medical gateway to the southern metro, as well as down to the southern part of Minnesota, extending down into kind of Owatonna and the areas south of the metro area. And medical office continues to perform very well. And there's also a really kind of interesting growing cluster in Burnsville between kind of medical spaces as well as kind of housing for 55 plus seniors. So Burnsville's part of kind of the broader gray tsunami, right, of areas of first and second ring suburbs where you have an aging population, where people are living still in larger single family homes but are looking for alternative homes to move into. And a lot of Burnsville's new real estate development, in particular in the multifamily space, has been advertised towards 55 plus communities. And in general, if you look nationwide, one of the largest correlations between where those communities are built and where seniors want to live is next to major regional malls because they're walkable spaces that people can go into and get out of their house. You can build multifamily or lower density, middle density housing in areas close around those. And there's a real opportunity, right, of thinking about the area around Burnsville Center and around Medical Fairview Complex as thinking about kind of the confluence of forces between kind of senior housing, senior services, health services, and housing, and kind of repurposing the area around the mall. So there's kind of a real strong focus there that continues to be focused on a kind of economic development strategy plan. In general, right, if we look at how the office market's been performing, in general, the medical office space has higher rents than some of the other general medical office buildings. But in general, the office market has had upward forcing rents. That's largely as places have chosen strategies to invest in their office space to try to create new amenities to attract people in. So those rents have been going up, but in general, the office is doing pretty well. And the other thing that I wanted to mention in relationship to Burnsville's office is that the office is also really nicely situated close to amenities, right? The heart of the city's strategy of putting office and putting commercial uses next to kind of a higher density residential area is concentrating in kind of a lateral way rather than a mixed use vertical way, a range of uses and amenities. And when we talk to real estate developers and realtors, Burnsville's office is in the have rather than a have not category for offices that are closer to these kind of amenities that kind of workers want. So they're actually pretty well positioned in the suburban market to continue to attract and retain office tenants. So it's a really good strength, actually, that the heart of the city is kind of creating this flywheel of amenities and concentrated services that then support the commercial market and create the kind of office spaces and the office drivers that continue to support occupancy within the office in the community. The last thing that I want to kind of focus on is the relationship between the region's industry and its housing. And this graph here looks at the relationship between jobs. And if you look at the left dot here, that's a single income. The right dot is a dual income. And on top is the AMI. So the areas, the average median income or average family income that's used for thinking about housing. And when you think about supportive housing, you think about LIHTC affordable housing, that usually supports people below 60% AMI. And if you look at the kind of jobs here that are served, that are created in the community that would be qualifying for affordable housing, it's a lot of first responders, teachers, police officers, food preparation, right? A whole broad range, machinists, right? A broad range of industries for single income earners that would be qualifying for affordable housing that is kind of desperately needed within the community. If you think about from dual income aspects, right, that's when you start getting into kind of the 80 to 120% is where you can find some like general market rate housing. New housing new market rate apartments can be built in that 80 to 120% range. And in general, kind of on the higher end of that 80 to 120 range is kind of demand for entry-level single-family homes. So in general, there's still strong demand, especially when you start getting into dual incomes for that kind of housing stock. And when we start to break things down, first I want to kind of talk about the rental market. So when it comes to kind of, right, the range of positions that are being created, and if you think about the fact that 25% of total jobs are still kind of in those low-income service sector jobs, you have a lot of people that are living in kind of the southern suburbs that are increasingly rent burdened. And Burnsville actually has one of the highest rates in the metro area of kind of rent to monthly income, and one of the higher rates of housing cost burden households, in particular of renters. And that trend, where a lot of it kind of decreased between 2016 and 2020, where you had high wage growth on the bottom end of the labor market and lower inflation, you kind of had a decrease region-wide in percent of renters that were cost burdened. But Burnsville actually has had a pretty strong upward counter trend to a lot of those areas and has continued to grow at a rate that's faster than other areas in terms of the proportion of renters that are cost burdened. So in general, it's very hard for people that are working workforce jobs to be able to find affordable housing and affordable rental housing in the current market. Again,
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So if you
Kara?
could go back one slide, please.
Mhm.
So in talking about the percentage that are rent burdened, is that because Burnsville has higher rent
So
than other cities? Or we have a larger proportion of people who are lower income and their income is lower than other cities? Trying to understand that slide.
There's, if you look at median rents, which is not included here, the median rents tend to be a little bit higher. And I think one of the major aspects is that while you still have a large proportion of people that kind of work in the lower wage sector, and that while there has been kind of strong growth from the bottom for the first time in 30 years, right, for people in that segment of the economy, it's still low relative to the rents within the community. And when new housing has been built, while there has been new supply that's been added, a large proportion of that new supply that has been added, in particular affordable housing stock, has been age restricted. So when you're adding kind of age-restricted units, it's great for getting and offering a range of new senior housing for people that are 55 plus, but doesn't necessarily abet the supply problem of affordable housing or housing for people in the kind of general rental market. So it's kind of a supply constraint.
So the answer is our
band.
apartments cost more than, like if you went to Egan,
Yes.
it costs, our apartments are more expensive to rent than Egan or St. Louis Park?
No, St. Louis Park would have more expensive. So you guys actually have a pretty high density of what we would call naturally occurring affordable housing. So that's housing that was built prior to 2000 that's affordable for people below 80% of their income. So a lot of that was built in the 1970s and the 1980s. So you do have a pretty high density of that housing stock. And it's a really important and crucial aspect of the regional housing market. But I think some of the issue with the recent, so you're like new housing that's getting developed is essentially at the same rate as, same cost as new housing in a place like Egan.
Right.
Right, your land costs are the same, the development costs are the same, the rents that they're charging are essentially the same. But the issue is that I think a lot of the housing that's being added here, and still a desirable place to live, is again in that senior market. So you're not adding kind of the affordable low-income housing tax credit units that somewhere like Egan would be adding. That would be general market. So if you look at the data then of the proportion of people paying market rents, you would have a higher proportion of general renters paying market rents than a place like Egan.
Okay. Councilmember Keeley.
Building on that, what I've noticed in doing some rent searching is that we have these 1970s apartment complexes that have been sold to investment groups. They've put some money into them, and they've elevated their rents dramatically over the last 5 to 7 years to where they are priced very close to a brand new build in the last 5 to 10 years with more amenities.
Right.
Things like in-unit washer and dryer is a big separator now. The old apartments don't have that. They have community laundry in the basement where the new units offer in, but the gap between those two is very small.
Yeah.
And it's surprising that they've been able to take advantage of this immense growth in the rental market and the inflationary rates that in the last decade that because these buildings are long since depreciated, right?
Yeah.
They're in the redevelopment, and they're replacing flooring, they're replacing pavement, they're replacing roofs, windows, doors. They're doing that kind of stuff, but they're charging rents that are very close to a brand new build, and yet they're all getting absorbed, although people are complaining.
Right.
So do you see any relief at all?
So one of the main strategies, even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, right, that the Twin Cities took was preserving naturally occurring affordable housing, and was looking at buildings that were going to be sold largely to private equity firms that were entering markets and buying these apartment complexes, sometimes doing so in a way where they're put on a coat of paint and don't do much more improvements, but then charge higher rents. The strategy that happened a lot in places like Seattle and San Francisco that were not adding new housing supply, so it kind of incentivized people, landlords, to go and do that kind of behavior because that was the only kind of stock that was available. But in a lot of places, the NOAA programs haven't been taken up, especially in the last couple of years when we've added a lot more rental stock. So it was kind of a major strategy in addition to adding rental supply. So there are programs that still exist where if a new building is coming online, that you can acquire that, essentially hand it over to a nonprofit to run it, and they'll keep those rents affordable for the long term. So there are a couple strategies around maintaining some of that naturally occurring affordable housing. But in general, I think one of the best strategies that we've seen from cities in terms of kind of maintaining that as affordable is that by building new rental stock, it essentially increases the incentive of landlords to either improve their properties, to either tear them down and rebuild them, or to offer more attractive rents. And so the rent pressure on that kind of NOAA stock, right, tends to go down when you add new supply and actually keep it affordable and kind of maintain the delta between the new stuff and the old stuff.
That's what we, I think, expected that might happen when we started opening up the market for new market rate product to come in. And I think it was a good thing for some of these complexes to sell and have a new investment group and put some money in them.
Yeah.
Because some of them needed a lot of money. But then it literally reflected in, I know one case, a person I know who came to me for some help with dealing with their property manager. She's lived there 6 years, and her rent is a little over $1,000 when she moved in, and it was $1,600 today. And that's a pretty stiff jump year over year consistently.
Yeah.
But that is absolutely a great example, a barometer for really what happened across the board in all of these older, very old, built in the 70s. Unless they are owned locally. There's one or two that are owned locally. They haven't sold to any investment groups, and they've maintained very affordable rates by comparison.
Yep.
They just didn't escalate their rents to the degree that others did, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people are still testing the market, right? And the fact that new supply has been added, and there was a bit of a panic that was happening in the last couple of years that we've just added so much new rental supply, the market was going to be flooded and would impact rents, hasn't really turned out to be true, right? We've actually absorbed a huge amount of that rental stock because of the ownership side of the market, where it's really hard to add new supply. Prices have been really high, interest rates have been really high. A lot of people have absorbed household debt, right? Like there's a lot of issues that are really kind of continuing to drive a secular shift towards renting. And I think that's showing up in the rental market region-wide and in Burnsville, where even as we're adding new rental stock, a lot of that's still getting absorbed and rental demand still remains really high. So that's kind of an issue one of like, how do you add affordable entry-level homes that, can be on the ownership side? And that's a pickle that I think we want to talk about a little bit here too. But one that also hasn't been solved in a lot of places because new home construction in general is expensive, right? A new home in the metro area costs on the cheapest exurban areas is still $350, $375.
Yes.
which is
And you-
affordable at that
And you
120
need
to
some
140
available
range.
land to build on,
Right?
which we're a little out of.
We don't have any land.
So that's the one aspect
yeah.
I wanted to get to, right? We kind of touched on this for a large amount recently, right? Burnsville is a mature suburb. It's shifted largely towards 5+ multifamily, but it's really interesting here how little there is in kind of that middle density or lighter density 2 to 4 unit multifamily. There's been almost no new addition of those kinds of units, which can be a really important source of entry-level home ownership. And in general, there's really strong demand, right? Townhomes and condominiums have actually grown in prices at a faster rate than single-family detached homes. The bottom tier and entry level of single-family homes, right? If you're thinking of homes that are affordable to households earning between 80 and 120% of AMI, demand has been strongest at the bottom tier and the middle tier. There's been, in this graph, 160% growth in those prices since the beginning of that time span. But, right, so there's really strong demand on the kind of lower end of that market. There's strong demand for the townhomes and condominiums in that market, but it's been really difficult to kind of add that supply. And again, home ownership rates have been lower within kind of Burnsville. There's been kind of a slight uptake, but the kind of goal that the city has set of around 70% is still lower. And one of the reasons for that is that we've been adding a lot of multifamily rental housing. Because that's kind of what can be developed and has been able to be successfully developed in the financing market and within the kind of rental demand profile that exists within the region. But in general, when you think about it, there's really demand for that kind of missing middle housing type. And while there still remains some major issues in developing that kind of stuff, one, the kind of developers for that don't really exist. You have single-family home builders and multifamily home builders, and no one's really cracked the nut of how to build that missing middle housing. But it kind of does fit the demand profile for the community. It fits the demand profile for 55+ households that want to continue to own and not rent, but want to be able to downsize into something like a townhome or a condominium. There's also pickles around insurance. So a lot of condominiums that got developed in the 1980s and townhomes had different insurance structures. They're easier to insure in the 1980s. Now they're really difficult to insure a condominium project. And so the kind of like entry-level condominium product just hasn't been built anywhere. But in general, there's been some strategies that places have taken outside of the Twin Cities area to kind of address some of those issues and financing for those kinds of projects. But in general, the kind of nut of like how to increase home ownership and kind of increase density within the areas that exist within kind of Burnsville's developable space is thinking about those kind of missing middle density housing projects and kind of supporting that kind of development. But in general, that was kind of the overall arc that we kind of wanted to hit, is that there's both demand for kind of the affordable housing stock and adding kind of the LIHTC units, but also in particular the entry-level single-family homes and homes also that are attractive to 55+ seniors that'd be interested in still kind of different ownership types or rental types of different housing types that can open up the single-family stock and some of the older single-family stock that would also be affordable for households earning kind of those middle-income wages that are really at the heart of kind of the industrial, wholesale and medical services industries. So those were kind of the major demand drivers for housing that we saw.
Madam Mayor, I just have one follow-up. The chart, the total housing gap by bedroom size, that's striking with the one bedroom. 13,424 on the supply side, or demand side, but 4,000, call it on the.
It's wild. It's wild when you look at that everywhere.
Apartments, or is that homes of any kind, meaning condo, apartment,
So if you
single
look
family?
at it's just the fact that there's a lot of empty nesters and kind of smaller households living in larger homes, and there's kind of underutilization of that space.
Yeah.
And that happens in the ownership market. So if you look at the rental market gap, it's not nearly as significant, right? Because a lot of the units that have been built are responsive to that. And there's a lot more change within that market in terms of people moving to more appropriate units. If you're a renter, right, you're going to move to something that fits your household as you change. Whereas the ownership market, it's much more lugubrious and slower to change to those kinds of demands. So there really is kind of, and this is true in most places where you have that gap show up so significantly. But I think it's even more pronounced in Burnsville than where I've seen it in other places because of kind of the post-war single-family homes that were built and kind of the people that are living in them now. So yeah, that kind of brings things to it. And happy to take some additional questions. I really appreciated the questions there in the presentation too. So.
Councilmember Schultz?
So on the housing summary, first of all, if you could go back a couple into the homeownership, go one forward, one, there we go. So to the home ownership rates, but this is showing our home ownership rates are going up closer to that 70% mark. But I'll also note, we had an unofficial moratorium on adding rental units for a long time in Burnsville, and that really didn't change until 2018. So even though those were added, home ownership rates were also rising during that time.
So a lot of it also is houses that were really affordable, right, in like the 2014 period. There's a lot of people that bought up housing cheap and rented it. And then as housing prices increased, they kind of sold that housing back off. And so there was kind of a shift in the single family rental market. And I forget what the proportion is, but that happened in a lot of places. Where you saw kind of a shift towards some single family rentals in the 2014 to 2018 period, but then kind of a sell-off of those. There's also kind of a statistical aspect here in 2020 where there's that jump up. They adjusted based on the census data in 2020, so it always comes back to kind of a more accurate count rather than an estimated count. So that could be part of that jump, but I think there could be some of those kind of dynamics happening, explaining that.
And then on your next slide on the analysis, or summary, thank you. So my question is, if there is a demand for lower income, entry-level, single-family homes, and also for like townhomes and that type of thing, or duplexes, or that type of home, we don't have area to develop. Like, it doesn't exist. So, like, what is the suggestion of what to do?
So adding the kind of middle density stuff can happen in redevelopment of actually pretty tight spaces, right? If there's a parking lot that was being redeveloped in and around the mall, you can build a mix of higher density townhomes and duplexes and condos within those spaces. So there's kind of some of the redevelopment that's potential around the mall that could absorb that kind of housing. But in general, right, like the housing market's doing well enough that there's not vacant, spaces that are being torn down and being redeveloped into those things.
Right.
You could do smaller kind of redevelopment of individual properties similar to infill style development, but that's also unlikely because demand for single family homes is still so high. So that's just kind of the aspect of thinking about kind of infill development or redevelopment of some of the commercial areas that are underutilized and thinking about the kind of housing mix that would be on there, right? It's like, don't go build a ring of single family homes in a redevelopment space, but Jeff, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything on there too in terms of thinking about that.
Yeah, Mayor. I completely agree, and that's recognized certainly in our work that we are a fully developed community at the high 90%. We don't have the greenfield developments to be building large scale development opportunities. I think what this confirmed for us is, we've seen in the last since 2018 largely the market creation around higher density multifamily, and that's been successful, and we've heard about that in the study. There is still the demand in the marketplace for a different housing type in the market, and we won't have the large areas for that, but I think we can think strategically as part of our planning efforts and our zoning about are there opportunities for some of that medium density land uses as we think and plan for projects like in the Burnsville Center or other areas of town where there are smaller scale redevelopment, but we're not going to be in a position where we're adding significant numbers of these housing units, but there is a market demand that we want to recognize in the data.
Okay, and then so I know missing middle is like the big buzz term right now, but let's eliminate that term and say exactly what it is. What is that?
Duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. I think if they can crack the nut on insurance for condominiums, I think of affordable condominiums,
Yeah.
like instead of rental product, right? Or not instead of, in addition to, is also a really important part of the housing stock that just hasn't been developed since the 1970s.
And so these would be
owner-occupied
Yeah.
units, yeah, or cooperatives, right? Those kinds of higher density ownership market that just hasn't been developed in the Twin Cities in a long time. So that's the kind of stuff that I think
We have a lot of townhomes.
you do. You do have
a lot of townhomes.
You have a really
And they're-
diverse
and they're,
market. Yeah.
You know, and a good portion of them, I would say the majority of them are not rental.
Right.
They're owner occupied.
No, you
So
got-
is that what you're talking about when you're talking about middle density?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's great stuff, right? Like it was the 1980s during the last period of high inflation when you had the savings and loans crisis and the insurance, the mortgage rate was 25%, that you had a huge amount of kind of this townhome, condominium, affordable entry level rental stock that all got built, right? It's a very similar moment to right now in terms of kind of broader macro political economy. And I think we're in that same moment where you have kind of just that really strong demand profile for that stuff, and it hasn't really existed to build it since the 1970s and 80s. So the issue with that is that there's a lot of opportunity, but there aren't that many developers that are out there with the skill set and with the abilities to do it either. And there's those changes around insurance stuff, but it still remains kind of a really important aspect of the housing market that hasn't been developed that would, be a really important intervention in terms of the housing supply in the region and in Burnsville.
Got it, okay.
Spencer,
And I'm a proponent of townhomes. I live in a townhome.
Yeah.
I'm a happy camper. Shout out to Walden, we rock. So,
Spencer, in the work that you've done, because we have quite a few of single-family homes in Burnsville, but not all of them are occupied by owners. They are also rental. So we have quite a few of those. So when you look at that and you have 70% is single-family owner-occupied, of that 70%, is that a true picture of our single-family housing stock, or is that just what we have in terms of the stock, but the rental is a part of that 70%?
Yes, it's not an indicator of just the single-family tenure structure.
That's what I thought when I read
It's
through
the general
it.
market.
Because
I
these
did
are
a
the
little bit-
pressures that I
right.
see us dealing with. It's, we don't have land for single-family. The opportunity that we have is the Burnsville Shopping Center area. But at the same time, we're dealing with property owners' rights. We're dealing with developers and how much that's going to cost. I mean, we put in a whole lot of new apartment buildings, a lot of new multi-housing, both in senior housing and in market rate. But they're not affordable. It's not just Burnsville, Lakeville, Egan, Savage, Apple Valley. So it's not what the city is doing, because our authority is in land use and zoning. It's the cost of developing all of this, and therefore those are the pressures that we deal with, and we have no control over any of that.
No, there's some element of control, right? Not even with LIHTC. LIHTC is controlled by developers. Sometimes there's pushback from the community in terms of adding market rate, family, not senior, right? Senior's usually been historically a tool to get those passed in city council or other things because it's more amenable to the people that don't want affordable housing in their community. So there's element of advocating for affordable housing in LIHTC housing that is for general market and not just for 55 plus. But you're right in the sense that, right, talking to developers, Burnsville has a great reputation. It has a great reputation of being development friendly, of working hard with developers to jump over hurdles that exist and making the de-risking process, right, happen. So make sure that when you're planning a project, you know what you're going to get when you go into it and when you build it. So it has a great reputation, but you're right that the costs are just high. I think the way, right, that economists think about the housing market is that you're going to build that market rate housing, and it's that NOAA housing, right, that becomes the really important housing for kind of your affordable stock. But that doesn't remain affordable because it's old. It remains affordable because there's alternatives on the market and sufficient supply. And what we were talking about earlier is that if you don't have sufficient supply, that affordable stock becomes expensive and gets market rate rents that are on par with the new development stuff. So increasing new development, increasing development kind of on all sides, public support development, private sector development of that kind of housing ensures that there's kind of a broader range of affordability. And again, the rental market's really tight.
Yeah.
And there might be changes, right, in interest rates and kind of a boom of housing construction that happens that shifts the rental market to make things more affordable, but that's also unlikely.
Yeah. Well, just looking at your data and you're seeing the occupancy rate in Burnsville, we have a good occupancy rate.
Great occupancy rate.
So randomly, I ask people who live in Burnsville in rental properties, and they says, so how much are you paying, if you don't mind my asking you, for a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom or a 3-bedroom? And when they tell me how much they're paying, and I says, are there other cities that might be cheaper than, and why do you choose Burnsville to be your home? Because they like Burnsville. They feel it's a safe community. They also believe that it's a community that says when it's welcome, they feel like they belong to the community. And I think that's important when people think they belong.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And so that what you said, that we have a good reputation, and I think that's what comes out when you ask people why. Why do you live in Burnsville if it's so expensive? Because they could probably go to Egan, where you say the rents are not as high as us, but not to St. Louis Park, because they're higher than us. But then I also looked at some of the rates up in Brooklyn Park. They're high.
Yeah.
The rental market in Brooklyn Park is also very high.
Yes. Yeah, no, rents are, the rents are high, right? Rental demand has continued to be really strong, and that's really just driving demand for rental apartments.
But I think it's when people choose to live here and they know why they choose, even though it's more expensive, than just going 3 miles, 5 miles into Egan and probably could get it.
I also don't think you should discount the investments that have been made in the heart of the city and kind of the proximity to a range of different amenities that exist in Burnsville. It's a very desirable place to live for someone that's looking for a more suburban urban mix, right? It's a really great place to live with a great accessibility to the regional labor market, proximity to jobs, proximity to transit, right? It has a lot of things going for it that, right, could also probably increase its naturally occurring affordable housing rates higher than kind of regional, than comparison places. That could be a really big aspect of that.
Yeah. Any other questions for Spencer? Jeff and Greg, thank you so much. This is great information for us to continue to move forward. Great information to help us when we look at the comprehensive plan as we look to the future. And it's good information, but what I look at is that in a year or two, we're going to have to do another analysis. Things change that quickly. So, I don't know. But we have some good base information here for us to move from. Yeah.
I just want to call attention to the toolkit in the back, page 170 through 180, I think it is. There's some great stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of buried in page 170.
Buried?
But,
what do you mean?
I mean, there's like a lot of great stuff to get there, but if you want to jump to some really good examples and call-outs in your toolkit, I thought that was good stuff.
Yeah.
The whole thing is full of incredibly valuable information that we're going
Great
to use for
data.
a long time.
Great data.
Yep.
I'm glad it's going to be useful. It means a lot.
Yeah, but, you know, but the thing is, when I looked at all of this and, you know, because one of the things is to say, here's how much we pay in terms of wages, and here's how much the housing cost in Burnsville. It's like, okay, here's a disparity. How do we make all of that work? Well, these are things that are out of our control. However, people are making it work. And the thing is, our unemployment rate is 2.8, the data we received November 2024. Thank you, Mike. So when you look at that unemployment rate, it's low, and then you look at our occupancy rate, and that's high. It's like, there's something here that we're doing right, that people work here. And then when I look at the data of where people are coming to work in Burnsville, and we have people going outside of Burnsville to work, but at the end of the day, they choose to come and be at home here.
They love the I-35 access to go see a Timberwolves game.
18
They like
minutes,
our
and we have
safe
good
city
transit.
That's provided by our public safety. They love our park amenities per capita, which is
Yeah.
higher.
We're in a great transportation corridor.
Put it this way, I've done a range of studies
Yeah.
recently for suburban cities across a broad range of places in the Midwest, in the South, and the Southeast, and the one example I use often and all the time is Burnsville, of a suburban city that has taken really strong planning strategies to build a very livable community that's accessible to a broad range of people, and have invested in, you know, kind of suburban retrofit strategies 10, 15 years before anyone else did, and it's paying dividends, right, in a lot of your real estate market and a lot of the element that's happening with like the office market, your industrial market.
Well, a lot of people think that with Burnsville is dissected by 2 federal highways, state roads, county roads, and we're dissected. Now, people would say that that's a weakness because of how the city is dissected. What we've done is really looked at that and made it our strength, because it's a great commercial corridor, not only for commerce, but for our people going to work and from work. So even though it's dissected, it's done well, I believe. So, you know, the early leaders of the city, I think, and some of your colleagues, because they came from Dahlgren, Shardlow, and Euban, did the first comprehensive plan and planning for the city, did a great job, and here you are, you know.
Yeah.
All of us benefit from all of those early decisions, and the people who came before us and made those plans for how Burnsville was designed, even with a dissected city.
I didn't realize it was a Stantec project until 3/4 of the way through.
Really?
And then I got the whole history from John Shardlow. So
Yeah.
it was really, you can get the whole history of anywhere in Minneapolis and Twin Cities from that man, but it was really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're building on the work that he's done, and we're building on those decisions that our predecessors made. But here we are. But thank you so much. Jeff, Greg, thank you, and to our whole staff. Thank you, Travis, everybody. Great work, and I'm sure that we'll be seeing you again, Spencer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you have any other questions, shoot me an email.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me
Yeah,
present.
we'll just go through Jeff, and he'll get in touch.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next item, this is another huge piece of information, and this is our organizational analysis. And Mike, this is yours. Thank you. I mean, that was huge. Was it 300 and some pages, Mike? It's
370
something pages. Oh, my God. Okay. But so comprehensive. Thank you so much for all of that. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening. So yeah, we're here to talk about the organizational analysis. As I appreciate the kind words, as I'll kind of mention here as I go through this. This is 100% a team effort. You know, this is the work of many of us around the table and beyond in the organization. So it's a lot of work, but it's very important for us as we plan ahead and make sure that we're delivering the best service that we can to the community. A little bit of background. The organizational analysis launched back in May of 2022. It was originally a 4-year plan to get to add an additional 56 FTEs to catch the city up kind of the 2022 staffing needs. And then each year we've been evolving and enhancing the plan to look out the next 5 years to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community. As we do that plan every year, it's a long process, a year-long process, but as we do it, we're always looking at the most effective way that we can use FTEs. So when we identify that there's a need with the community, first thing that we do is how can we use existing resources, or are there ways that we can reallocate resources to make that happen? And then again, it's a collaborative process. We cannot put this document together without the work of the leadership team and our teams throughout the organization. A little bit of a change. So we previously would present the org analysis in December at the end of the calendar year. Starting this year and moving forward, we'll start doing it in January to kind of kick off our annual budget process. So you'll see that presented to you in January here moving forward. And then a little bit of a reminder, the 3 elements of the organizational analysis are service. So we look at the service that we provide to to the community. This year, you'll notice a big reason why the org analysis is a lot bigger than it has been in previous years is we've enhanced that service inventory where we've mapped the service that our departments and our staff deliver to the community to their job descriptions. It's kind of an evolution of this service inventory. We'll continue to evolve that over the next handful of years. Staffing is making sure we have the right people, the right positions, that we can meet the needs of the community, and then compensation is our strategy to attract and retain the best and the brightest that we have. So a couple things that you'll see when you look at the org analysis, we have 2 designations. These haven't changed. So we have future study. It's a position that we've identified there's a need, but we need some more data and some more research to determine exactly what that need is. You'll see that there's a note here that we're going to retire that in 2027. So moving forward, you'll only see future funding or positions that are included in the FMP and already been kind of discussed with council. So, but for this edition, you'll see that there's still future funding designated on the org analysis. I'm going to show you, this is 2025. So this is the org analysis that was presented last year. Reason why I show this is we've identified some emerging staffing needs, particularly in the fire department. That we wanted to highlight and talk with council about. So you'll see we have 3 designated for 2025, new FTEs, and then 6 slated for 2026. And with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Chief Jungman because he will be able to speak more eloquently and effectively about this emerging need.
Yeah.
Chief?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, yeah, we've definitely had some emerging staffing challenges, particularly around long-term leaves, turnover, military leave, things like that have left us without the staffing to meet the minimum staffing requirements without a lot of overtime. And staff is working a lot of overtime just to maintain shift minimums. And so proposed moving up 6 FTEs from 2026 into 2025. 3 of those in the summer and 3 of those in the fall to align with our academies. To better position us, because we know even when we hire them, it still takes us about 18 weeks to get them fully up to speed and operating. So it's a bit of a training mountain to get them to the top of that so that they're fully informed and ready to go. So we think by moving this forward, it'll alleviate the emerging issue that we have and set us on a better path. So we believe that we can care for the cost of these positions through operational savings And we're working on the standard of cover currently, in April-ish, hopefully be done with it and present it to talk about 2026 and beyond of risk assessment, what are our needs, what are the metrics we're using, and what do we predict will be the kind of the future demand for service, so.
Thank you, Chief. So you'll see here, this is the 2026 organizational analysis, highlighting again that the standard of cover from the fire department will be delivered sometime in April to May. So that's why those are kind of listed as future funding. Those are placeholders. We have a good idea of kind of what the staffing need is going to be, but those will be finalized ahead of those conversations. Other thing of note that you might see is there's a couple positions that were slated for 2026 that have been pushed back to 2027 in IT, Parks and Rec and Facilities and Public Works, and those are just because we haven't had studies completed. We're still looking at collecting additional data and information to inform those positions and what needs are needed there. Compensation. So we have a 2-year cycle that we operate with the organizational analysis. First one is internal alignment. We do that on even years. So this last year, we went through all of our job descriptions, reviewed them with staff and managers to make sure that they were up to date. We ran them through our job evaluation system to make sure that they were rated properly, getting those all ready to go. And then next week, you'll see on the council consent agenda a professional service agreement to go out and do a compensation study, just to check the market to see if we're still aligned with our compensation strategy that we adopted. And we'll do that on a 2-year cycle, just to make sure that we're remaining competitive. And then service, again, service inventory, we did kind of an overhaul or an enhancement to the service inventory this year. We plan on continuing to enhance that and grow and make that more effective as we go through. But again, it maps the work that our staff do to the service that we provide to the community. And then with that, some next steps. So in March, you'll see that there's a note here about a budget amendment to Chief Youngman's point regarding the FTE, the acceleration of the FTE. There'll be a budget amendment that will come through, not for dollars, because we believe we can fund that with operational savings, but just to adjust the FTE in the 2025 budget. And then March 25th is really when the budget cycle kind of kicks off with the FMP, and then in April or May is when standards of cover will be presented by the fire department. I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mike?
That was a remarkably short presentation for
Yeah.
a remarkably thick
Yes.
book that you passed out.
And let me tell you where the bulk of the information that Mike has here, and you said that this was a combined effort of everyone.
Absolutely.
Because just going through all of the functions for each, I'm thinking, this is good reference as we go through and look at the responsibility, the essential function, the job title, the service, and so forth. Well done, because it gives a description and all of those things. But it's every position that we have in the city, correct?
Correct.
That's a lot of work.
It was a lot of work. Like I said, it was very much a team effort, and the hope is that it's going to help us again address effectiveness. You know, when we identify a need, it's going to be a great tool for us. And again, the plan is to continue to grow, enhance it, and see how we can better utilize that data point.
Because, you know, to our two chiefs, having a safe city is what I heard from people when I asked them the question with regard to our housing, or why do they continue to live in Burnsville if it's too expensive? But it's a safe city. But here's the other thing that I think is trending higher. Our community engagement. not only from the positions in that whole communication and engagement, but also the work out of police. Building trust in the community, when you look at the responsibilities that are outlined and what's the essential function, I think this is a group that's going to create the magic.
Absolutely.
Create the magic in terms of building the trust and the connections and the bridges between City Hall and our community, our people. So kudos. Great work, Mr. City Manager, and to everybody. They're the people that are going to be out there in the communication and peace. Chief, I see that Chief Schwartz. On the police side, your 3 FTEs, are they all going to be in behavioral health?
2 will be in behavioral health, 1 will be community engagement.
You see, that's what I read through that, and that's what I wanted, because it's so important. And all of that work is where the magic happens, I believe. And the trust between us and our community, so. And Chief Jungman, I hear from people, you do a lot of work with education of our people. They like that. And you two partner on some of those things. And I haven't been to any of those sessions, but they must be well attended, because, I mean, randomly when I ask people about all of those things, well, I know the academy, the police academy is always full, and so there are people on a wait list. But all of the sessions that you hold over at Fire Station 1, I hear a lot of people attend them, but, you know, I've never been there. So are they full most of the time?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like our Fire Ops 101 class, yeah.
Not just Fire Ops 101, but all of the other education sessions that you hold with regard to safety, what they can do, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, we do a fair amount with like CPR and some of that, yeah. We get it's kind of hit or miss, but yeah, we get good attendance at many of them. So,
Yeah, a lot of them attend those.
Yeah.
I tend to ask them about what they like. Yeah, but yeah, so thank you. I mean, it is really great information just to go through all of this, but it's a reference because, oh boy, to your point, Councilmember Keeley, because I went through it and I'm thinking, okay, I think I'm going to use this as a reference when I'm trying to understand what's going on in the different, because it is quite comprehensive, and it's every position in the city.
324. That's individuals,
Yeah.
actual jobs.
Yeah.
Somewhere around 115
Yeah,
individual jobs or different jobs.
yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts, comments for Mike and the team? Great work. Thank you so much. Yeah. Greg?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the one thing that I would like clarity on from the council is if there is a majority of you who are interested in or supportive of a budget amendment for 2025 that would include the acceleration of those 6 FTEs for the fire department. Again, by our review of the budget, we believe that through staff savings and addressing some of the overtime issues that Chief Junman shared with you tonight, that we can operationalize in 2025 those FTEs without an impact to the budget. That will require offsetting primarily within the fire department itself. That would then set us up for a conversation in the 2026 budget process, looking ahead as BJ presents his standard of cover, and we look at those potential future funding positions that will come out of that in the organizational analysis. We have a policy, the council has a policy that does not allow the city manager to change the FTE complement of an adopted budget. That would require action of
Yeah.
the city council, even if it's budget neutral. So it would require action of the city council somewhere around that March timeframe
Yep.
that Mike and the chief mentioned. We typically do a budget amendment around that time, somewhere between February and April. Usually that's to clean things up from a overall budget perspective. It's not normal for us to come back and ask for a change in FTE complement. Usually that's a financial amendment that's being made, or an actual dollars and cents amendment. But wanted to get a general feel for the council's perspective on that, which then will inform our staff planning for the year.
Yeah, we're not taking a vote, we're just, you're just wanting,
Just looking to see if
Yeah,
you are interested in us
yeah.
bringing that budget amendment
Yeah.
back to you.
Councilmember
for those 6
Workman.
FTEs.
Councilmember Schultz, Councilmember Keely.
Absolutely. And I
Okay.
would assume it's going to come back in a presentation so
Yeah,
we can see the
yeah,
data.
it's just, yeah, but it'll allow them to do the work, to
Yes.
go forth and do the work, okay? You have unanimous around the table.
Mayor, council members, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's a very important step this year as
Yeah.
we're flexible and adaptable in all of these plans. It would be my choice that we would have all of these things packaged up early in the year as we get ready to put a budget in front of you. So I appreciate the flexibility. This is very important, both in terms of fire operation and making sure that our people in the fire department are well supported this year. And I know that it will go a long way to addressing some of the pressures that they've been feeling. So I'm very appreciative of that. And we'll come back to you, Councilmember Keely, your point. I don't recall if we usually present budget amendments, Jenny, on a regular agenda or not, but we will bring it back as a regular agenda item, and Chief Judman can help explain some of that data as well.
Yeah, for the
It's
general
just for
public to
transparency's
correlate
sake.
the support for why.
Yeah. Just for transparency's
Jenny, I
sake.
think we usually do it on consent. Is my
Yeah.
memory correct on that?
Yeah, usually.
We'll bring
Yeah.
it back as a regular item
Yeah.
For that purpose.
Because it's an FTE change, I think
Yeah.
that's indicated.
Yeah. Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to the next item on the agenda, and this is the adult use cannabis. Our city clerk, Michelle Collins, and our deputy city clerk, Erica Henderson, is presenting. Mrs. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. Last year, the Office of Cannabis Management released guidance for cities for administration and compliance with the new regulations on cannabis. Now, they had planned to start doing licensing early this year, and that has not happened yet. But the two items that they gave guidance for cities to consider are ordinance amendments for Title 10 to zoning uses, and that was completed the council approved that in December. And then Title 3 is the registration process, and that's what we're working on tonight. In Title 3, we will need to address the local retail registration process, fees, and also enforcement in our code. Once that state licensing program begins, then they will need to seek a retail registration license from the city. And here are the different types of businesses that the state does license, that the city will be required to register. Regular cannabis retailer, but then we have a micro business, a meso business, our medical cannabis, and this will also include our low potency hemp retailers as well. The registration process will give some options for the council. They can either have this administratively approved by staff, and this would be similar to tobacco. We could have it council approved without a public hearing, just on a consent agenda, similar to how we approve, say, gambling premises permits. The council could also elect to have this approved at a council meeting with a public hearing. And now that would be similar to like how we approve our liquor licenses. And then the renewal process for these could be the same as the initial application, or it could be changed for the renewals to be either administratively or by consent or by council. The registration fees are set by statute with a maximum, and the maximums are set at $500 or up to half of the amount for both the initial and for the initial registration fee. And now the renewal is set at $1,000 or up to half of the amount of the renewal license fee. In both cases, the 500 and 1,000 would be the maximum that our city could set them for, except for that micro business, because they set the fee at 0 for an initial, and so we cannot be more than half of the state, so we would be at 0. When we looked at our current fee schedule, we likened it to the tobacco fee schedule, and in that case, the license fees are $400 for both initial and renewal, and at this time, we don't know of any reason why it would cost the city more than that to process these registrations than what we could typically do with something like a tobacco license. So we have proposed that the initial and renewal fees for most of those be at $400. The low potency hemp retailers, that maximum by statute for that would be $125. And then we are also adding in here a temporary cannabis event registration fee. We don't have a tobacco temporary event, but we do have liquor temporary events, and those are set at $110 per day, and we're proposing to keep those the same. OCM will also require cities to do enforcement for age verification on all of these establishments. The police are required to go to all registered retailers at least once per year, and this is similar to what they do for liquor and tobacco currently. Right now, we have about 82 establishments. The last time we added up the numbers, we had 82 for the police to do compliance checks every year. And of the 42 low-potency hemp businesses that we currently have that are part of this registration process, 25 of them already have a liquor or tobacco license. So for that category, we would be adding approximately 17 additional compliance checks to the police department on top of however many cannabis retailers we get. We also have an opportunity to set failed compliance check fees. We are recommending again that we follow similar to what we've set for our tobacco violations, $300 for the first fine, $600 for the second, $1,000 for the third violation within 3 years, and suspension upon the fourth. And this tobacco violation fines are set in statute, and we have adopted those in our city code as well, and we're just proposing to carry those over for cannabis. Now, back in August of 2024, at the work session, the council did discuss some items that are related to Title III amendments, and that would be whether or not we would have caps on cannabis retail license holders. Now, this would not include those low-potency hemp dealers. This is just for cannabis retail. And there's a minimum that we're required to allow. I believe it's 1 per 12,500 population. So about 6 we'd be required to have. But the council could set a maximum if they wanted, and the council at that time said that they did not want to do that. And they also, council also has said that they did not want to install buffers between schools, daycares, treatment facilities, or parks at this time. The next step is we're going to take the direction we get from the council tonight and prepare an ordinance for the council to consider in February. We've been working with our city attorneys to put some standard language together that's kind of like being used by most of the cities, and then amending it to fit within our current city code. Okay. Tonight, the direction we're looking for from the council is what type of registration process would you like to see? Now, we are recommending that it be administratively approved, and specifically that's because the state is already licensing them and doing the background checks. So there's no need for us to repeat that process. But the registration, and so I think it could easily be done administratively. We're also looking for how you feel about our proposed fees, the initial fees, the renewal fees, and the temporary event fees, and also if you agree with our proposals for the fines.
Okay, very good. Members of the council, do you believe that we should just direct staff to approve them administratively so it's more efficient? Okay, I agree.
Yep.
Yeah? Okay, so administratively. So registration administratively, and it makes sense. The state is already licensing it. Why do we have to duplicate that action? Okay? And then secondly, the fees, initial fees, renewal fees, and temporary fees. Do you agree with the suggestions that staff is proposing? Councilmember Workman?
I concur.
Yeah. Okay. You got,
Our renewal's a little out of sync with everybody else, but I'm fine
yeah,
staying.
they're just the same
lower
with our tobacco, which for me, then it's consistent with everything else. And then the last one is fine, similar to tobacco. Do you agree? Okay. Okay, everybody? Kara? Okay. So you've got direction, and administratively, what you're recommending for fees is okay, and the fines, similar to our tobacco, so it's all in alignment, so there's no confusion. Okay, very good. Anything else?
Thank you.
All right, great, thank you so much. All right, then we'll go to roundtable and reports. Nothing on roundtable. Councilmember Workman, any reports?
No reports.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz, Councilmember Keeley? Yeah.
I always have transportation stuff. Our I-35 Solutions had a interesting discussion. We're going to change how we, and by the way, we're getting a lot of help from Mark. We're going to change our approach to I-35's mission is going to focus on just the corridor. We used to have the 77 corridor and the 169 corridor and adjacent projects sort of listed as supporting, similar to our legislative. But we're going to just stay focused on the items that we are specifically working on and advocating for that have a direct alignment and connection with I-35 from Minneapolis to Elko Newmarket. Legislative update from I-35 is, well, everybody knows that from the news. And lastly, just following up on last month's announcement of the National League of Cities, they are funding an event in Burnsville. I was very honored to be asked to host, and MBTA is going to be, as I mentioned earlier today, MBTA is the lead agency in partnership with the city. It's providing some great assistance. Mark has been just fantastic. And Enterprise Mobility, we named it Mobility Matters, Bridging the Gap, a transit mobility event at the Wyndham Hotel. It's on March 5th from 8 to 1. We've got some great speakers, the state demographer, presentation from the U of M transit specialist, Dakota County Transportation, our county commissioner is going to be speaking. Matt Fighton and I from MBTA are going to present our microtransit, and we'll have our eJust vehicles, all electric minibuses, the first ones in the United States. They're built in Turkey. You may have seen them driving around town. They're cute little minibuses. They're 100% electric, and they weigh a ton. Actually, many tons. So they get great traction in sloppy, snowy weather. And then we'll have a press conference at 1 o'clock. It'll be inside the hotel as we open up the rest of the room that we're in at the Wyndham. And so we're expecting about 50 people. There's a lot of people in this room that are invited. And I am hoping that our legislative delegation is going to be able to make it and get away, but they might be really busy early March based on the way things are getting started. That's all I have.
Okay. And I have nothing to report.
started.
I will be in Washington DC tomorrow for the U.S. Conference of Mayors.
Are you going to the inaugurational ball?
No, I'm going to be home on Saturday.
And watch it on TV like the rest of us? Or,
a lot of work, a lot to get through, but I have nothing to report. And Mr. Lindberg, is there anything that staff wants to report on?
Just one reminder, Mayor, MLC is hosting their regional legislative
right.
breakfast. That's on January 24th. So
Oh,
if you're interested
good.
in attending, we certainly can get you registered for that. Our team's been hard at work. MLC has a fairly strong focus on housing this year. So our team's been hard at work developing a handout that MLC has requested as the group advocates in St. Paul for housing issues. Their agenda has been adopted by the board, and I've shared it with you in my weekly update. I'll make sure that is available to you as well, particularly as we get our materials submitted to them by the end of this week.
Okay. Anything else, staff? Everybody is good? All right. I like that you guys now also have your written reports in a work session. So I have a hard copy. I'm not reading it. Have to make it really look big when I go through.
surge pricing.
So thank you.
You
Yeah.
have free hotel.
But the thing that is really interesting, when people ask me what is the biggest issue we have, and reading both of your reports and everything else, it's mental health.
That's incredible.
Because everything else is going down. Crime rate in the city is down. Fire is flat. Your EMS calls are vertical. Chief. Mental health calls are vertical. Yeah. So, thank you for all the work. Please, every time I see any of our officers, I thank them for their service. So thank you so much for everything that you all do. Really appreciate it. So if there's nothing else that comes before us, we stand adjourned by acclamation. Thank you, everyone.